In the next sentence, we have, Thy will be done. How do we understand God's will? Well, God has told us. From the very beginning, God said, Eat from this tree, do not eat from this tree. He set his expectations. He told us what his will was. He is constantly communicating to us. All the rules that we have in the church, from fasting to prayer to almsgiving, do your cross this way, don't do your cross that way, go on this side, go on that side, go over here, do this, do that. All the rules that we have in the church are a way to teach us how to do the will of someone else, how to be obedient and disciplined in our obedience. And these, of course, are virtues, and they teach us how to do the will of someone else. And so when we do the will of someone else, of course, when it's God, when it's the loving embrace of the church, when it's our priest, our parents, our family members, we learn how to do the will of someone else. So this is something to talk to the children about, especially because we should always do these things out of love. We know what God offers back to us. He offers his own very body and his blood. What do we offer back to him? We do his will. The other things to think about is, on a more high level, how is it that we enter into the will of God? Well, one of the ways we can do that is to be like children. This is a beautiful way to enter into the will of God. The other way that we can do this is do this in remembrance of me. He tells us to do communion, to do the sacraments, to enter into his life through the life of the church, and everything that we do in the church is an entrance into God's will. And just by stepping into the church, we are entering into God's will. And of course, most importantly and primarily through Holy Communion. Do this in remembrance of me is one of the most profound ways that we can enter into the will of God. And then finally, to step into a space where we can encounter God. And St. Gregory Palamas beautifully tells us, one of his disciples asked him, Father, where can I find God? Where can I find him? Where can I go to find him? And St. Gregory Palamas says, you can find God in the vibrancy of silence. And so when we step into silence, there's actually a vibrancy there, a presence of God in that space, and we could find God in that as well. And so when we do these things, like stepping into God's space, when we do this in remembrance of him, when we behave like the innocence of children, then we start channeling God's will, and then we can do his will. And of course, all the rules and all the different parameters that we have in the church, those are also beautiful ways for us to enter into the will of God. But truly it is about lessening ourselves and being in service to the other, being in service to God, and then we can encounter him and his will, just as our vision statement tells us.